The massive crystal dome of Xanthera Prime sparkled like a jewel against the purple sky. Inside, representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in perfect rows, their bodies as different as the stars themselves. Some floated in tanks of glowing liquid, others perched on crystalline branches, and a few existed as pure energy contained in silver spheres. At the center of it all sat the humans. Admiral Sarah Chen kept her back straight as alien eyes studied her from every direction. Next to her, Dr. James Foster shifted nervously in his chair. Behind them, Engineer Maria Santos stared at the ceiling, probably calculating structural loads out of habit. They were the only humans in a room full of beings who could read minds, live for thousands of years, or reshape matter with their thoughts. Council Elder Vexthani rose from her crystal throne. Her body looked like living glass, and when she spoke, her voice rang like wind chimes. We gather today to discuss the newest members of our galactic community, the species that calls itself human. A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the assembly. The Zephyrians, who looked like walking trees made of metal, rustled their leaves. The Altarians, tall and pale with silver eyes, tilted their heads in unison like a flock of birds. For 2 years we have observed this species. Vexathani continued. We have studied their abilities, their technology, their social structures. Today we will determine their proper place in galactic civilization. Admiral Chen felt her jaw clench. She had fought in 3 wars, negotiated peace treaties, and commanded fleets across human space. Now she sat like a student waiting for her grades. The first speaker was Commander Zix of the Cruton Empire. He looked like a walking tank made of dark metal with red lights where his eyes should be. The humans possess no natural telepathy, he announced, his voice like grinding gears. They cannot communicate mind to mind. They must use primitive sounds and gestures. How can they function in civilized society? Murmurs of agreement echoed through the chamber. Dr. Foster leaned toward Chen. Should we explain about body language and tone? He whispered. Chen shook her head slightly. She wanted to hear all of this. Next came Professor Thies of the Academic Collective. She resembled a giant butterfly with wings that showed shifting mathematical equations. Their technology is crude, she declared. They still use chemical combustion for space travel. Their computers require physical components. They have not even mastered basic matter manipulation. Their lifespans are pathetically short, added Healer Morwin of the Altarian Medical Council. Barely 100 of their years at most. How can beings with such brief existences contribute anything meaningful to galactic progress? The criticism continued for hours. The humans were too emotional, too violent, too chaotic. Their planet was divided into competing nations instead of unified under one government. They couldn't predict the future. They didn't even have proper energy beings among them. Admiral Chen listened to every word. She watched the alien faces, noting the smugness of the Altarians, the cold calculation of the Zephyrians, the barely contained aggression of the Crutons. These beings thought they knew everything about humanity based on 2 years of observation. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Finally, Vexthani called for order. We have heard the evidence. The humans lack the basic capabilities required for full membership in galactic society. They are by any measure inferior to the established species of our community. The words hit like physical blows. Dr. Foster's face went red. Engineer Santos gripped her chair so hard her knuckles turned white. But Admiral Chen just smiled. Therefore, Vexthani announced, this council hereby classifies the human species as developmentally restricted sentience. They will be granted basic protection under galactic law, but will have no voting rights. They may serve in manual labor positions under proper supervision. This decision is final. The vote was called. One by one, each species cast their decision onto the great display above the chamber. Green lights filled the screen like stars, each one a vote for humanity's downgrade. Only one red light appeared, small and defiant among the sea of green. Admiral Chen stood up. The chamber fell silent. You want to make a statement before you leave? Vexathani asked, her crystal face showing what might have been pity. Chen looked around the room slowly, meeting as many alien gazes as she could. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly to every corner of the dome. You've spent 2 years watching us, she said. You've studied our technology, our society, our capabilities. You think you understand what humans are. She paused, letting the silence stretch. You know nothing. Commander Zix made a sound like steam escaping. Threats will not change our decision, human. That wasn't a threat, Chen replied calmly. That was a warning. You see, there's something you don't understand about my species. When we're treated fairly, we're the best friends you could ask for. We'll work beside you, help you solve problems you didn't even know you had, and die to protect people we care about. She started walking toward the exit, her boots echoing on the crystal floor. Dr. Foster and Engineer Santos fell in behind her. But when you treat us as inferior, Chen continued without stopping, when you decide we're not good enough to sit at your table, well, she reached the massive doors and turned back one last time. You're about to discover why every predator on our homeworld learned to fear us. The doors sealed behind the humans with a sound like thunder. For a moment, the chamber remained silent. Then the business of the day continued. Trade agreements were signed. Territorial disputes were mediated. The great work of galactic civilization moved forward. None of them noticed the small devices that Engineer Santos had quietly attached under their chairs during the long hearing. Devices that were already transmitting everything they had heard back to Earth. None of them thought to check what Dr. Foster had been doing with his tablet during their speeches. None of them wondered why Admiral Chen had seemed so calm. Within hours, every human ship, station, and colony in the galaxy had received the same message. The recording of the trial, the vote, the declaration, and Admiral Chen's final words. By the time the council members returned to their luxurious quarters that evening, humanity was already moving. Ships that had been carrying supplies to alien worlds suddenly changed course. Human engineers working on critical projects across the galaxy received new orders. Diplomatic missions were recalled. The message was simple and clear. If the galaxy wanted to treat humans as inferior, then the galaxy was about to learn what life was like without them. In her chambers on Xanthera Prime, Admiral Chen stood at her window looking up at the stars. Her communicator buzzed with incoming messages from Earth, from the colonies, from human ships scattered across known space. Each one asked the same question, what now? Chen smiled and opened a channel to Earth Command. This is Admiral Chen, she said quietly. Operation withdrawal is authorized. Show them what they just gave up. The galaxy was about to get a very expensive education. The first sign of trouble came from the Zephyrian mining colony, on Kepler 442 Beta Chief Operations. Manager Veltar was reviewing the daily reports when his metal leaves began to rattle with confusion. The primary extraction facility had simply stopped working. Not broken down, not exploded, just stopped. Explain this to me, Veltar demanded as he strode into the control room, his tree-like body creaking with each step. Supervisor Kindal, a younger Zephyrian with bright copper leaves, pulled up the diagnostics. The extraction systems are running perfectly, sir. All readings are normal. But we're getting zero output. That's impossible, yes, sir. That's what I thought too. Veltar studied the screens with growing alarm. The massive drilling equipment was spinning exactly as it should. The refinement chambers were processing material at the correct temperatures. The transport systems were moving with their usual precision. Everything looked perfect. Nothing was coming out. Where are the humans? Veltar asked suddenly. Sir? The human engineers. Where are they? Kindal checked his roster. Oh, they were reassigned this morning. New council directive. They're working in the sanitation department now. Veltar felt something he had never experienced before in his 300-year life. Panic. Get them back here, now. Sir, the council order specifically states that humans are only suitable for manual labor positions. Engineering is too complex for their inferior minds. I don't care what the council says. Veltar roared, his leaves turning a dangerous shade of red. Get me Chief Engineer Rodriguez immediately. But it was too late. Maria Rodriguez was already 3 systems away, along with every other human engineer in the Zephyrian mining fleet. The extraction facility that had been running perfectly for 2 years ground to a halt, and no one could figure out why. Across the galaxy, similar disasters were unfolding. On the medical station orbiting Altair 7th, head physician Lysith was dealing with her own crisis. The emergency ward was in chaos. Patients who should have been healing were getting worse. Treatments that had worked perfectly yesterday were failing today. Dr. Lysith called Nurse Felnara, her silver skin pale with worry. The Cruton patient in bed 7 is rejecting the neural interface again. Lysith hurried over to examine the massive alien. His metal body was sparking where the medical devices connected, and his red optical sensors flickered weakly. This interface worked perfectly last week, she muttered, adjusting the settings. The sparking got worse. Doctor, perhaps we should consult with Dr. Patterson? Felnara suggested. Dr. Patterson is no longer assigned to medical duties, Lyseth replied stiffly. The Council has determined that human medical knowledge is inferior to our advanced techniques. But sir, he was the one who modified this interface. He said something about biocompatibility matrices and adaptive resonance. I didn't understand it, but it worked. Lyseth felt her carefully controlled emotions crack slightly. She was the finest physician in the Altarian Medical Corps, trained in the most advanced healing techniques in the galaxy. She should not need help from a primitive human. But as she watched the Cruton patient's vital signs fail, she realized that understanding and pride were very different things. The worst situation was developing in the neutral zone, a tense region of space where three major powers had been on the brink of war for decades. The Cruton Empire, the Hive Collective, and the Free Traders Alliance had competing claims on several resource-rich systems. For the past 2 years, an uneasy peace had held. That peace lasted exactly 6 hours and 17 minutes after the Council's declaration. General Vexkarn of the Cruton Third Fleet was the first to act. His massive dreadnought, the Iron Fist, moved to claim the disputed mining rights around Proxima Station. It was a routine show of force, the kind that had been happening regularly without incident. But Lieutenant Marcus Webb wasn't there to smooth things. Over Webb had been the human diplomatic attaché, assigned to monitor the neutral zone. He was a small man with brown hair and tired eyes, the kind of person who seemed to fade into the background. The aliens had barely noticed him during their negotiations. They noticed his absence immediately. Within minutes of the Iron Fist's movement, Queen Zareth of the Hive Collective interpreted it as an act of aggression. Her swarm ships launched from their hidden positions in the asteroid belt, their organic hulls gleaming like black pearls as they swarmed toward Cruton space. Trade Captain Moss of the Free Traders saw both movements and assumed the worst. His merchant fleet was full of valuable cargo, and he couldn't afford to lose it to either empire. He activated the defense protocols that would bring in mercenary fleets from across the sector. In less than an hour, 3 fleets faced each other in open space, weapons powered and shields raised. Admiral Sarah Chen would have called it a powder keg, but none of the aliens understood that particular human expression. They were about to learn. Back on Xanthera Prime, Council Elder Vexithani was enjoying a peaceful evening when the emergency reports started flooding in. Her crystal form flickered with alarm as she read message after message. Zephyrian mining operations. Complete failure across 17 systems. Altarian medical stations. Patient mortality rates increasing by 300%. Cruton agricultural worlds. Crop yields dropping rapidly, and most urgent of all, open warfare breaking out in the neutral zone. This cannot be coincidence, Vexthani said to her aide, a younger crystal being named Veltesh. Contact the other council members immediately. Within the hour, the emergency session was convened. The great dome hummed with worried voices in a dozen different languages. Representatives who had been celebrating their wise decision that morning now looked confused and frightened. Explain to me, Commander Zix growled, his red optical sensors burning bright, how the removal of a few primitive humans has caused this much chaos. Professor Theis's wings fluttered nervously, equations scrolling across them too fast to read. The statistical probability of these failures occurring simultaneously is less than 0.0001%. Yet here we are, Healer Morwen said quietly. My medical staff is reporting that treatments which worked perfectly are now failing. The only difference is, the humans are gone, Vexthani finished. The chamber fell silent. Outside, the purple sky of Xanthera Prime was beginning to darken toward night. Somewhere in that darkness, human ships were moving with purposes the Council was only beginning to understand. We need to investigate this thoroughly, Vexithani announced. I want complete reports on every system where humans were working. I want to know exactly what they were doing. Surely, you don't believe that primitive beings could be responsible for, began Senator Klymouth, of the Academic Collective. He was interrupted by an urgent communication from the neutral zone. The holographic image of Admiral Telvar of the Cruton fleet appeared in the center of the chamber, his metal face scarred from recent battle damage. Council members, he said, his voice distorted by static. We need immediate assistance. The situation here has deteriorated beyond our control. We need mediators, we need engineers, we need... He paused, and for the first time in Council history, a Cruton military commander showed something that looked like humility. We need the humans back. The transmission ended, leaving the Council in stunned silence. In the space of one day, they had gone from declaring humans inferior to desperately needing their help, and they were starting to realize that this was only the beginning. The investigation began at dawn on Xanthera Prime, but the results were already clear across the galaxy. Something was very wrong with the Council's understanding of humans. Chief Operations Manager Veltar of the Zephyrian mining colony was the first to make the connection. After 3 days of complete system failure, he had finally swallowed his pride and contacted the human engineers who had been reassigned to sanitation duties. "Rodriguez," he said to the small human woman who had been cleaning floors for the past week, "I need you to look at something." Maria Rodriguez set down her mop and followed him to the extraction facility. She spent exactly 4 minutes examining the systems, before she sighed and shook her head. "You changed the frequency modulation?" "On the drilling heads," she said simply. "Veltar's." Metal leaves rustled in confusion. "The drilling heads are operating at exactly the specifications provided by our engineers." "Yeah, that's the problem." Rodriguez pulled up the system diagnostics on her tablet. "See this mineral composition reading? The rock layers shifted about 6 months ago. I've been gradually adjusting the frequency to match the new density. Your engineers put it back to the original settings, but our calculations show..." "Your calculations assume the planet is uniform," Rodriguez interrupted. "But planets aren't uniform. They're messy. They change. You need to adjust for that." She made a series of small modifications to the drilling systems. Within minutes, the extraction facility roared back to life, producing more refined ore than it had in months. Veltar stared at the output readings in disbelief. "How did you know to make these adjustments?" Rodriguez shrugged. "Experience. Trial and error. We call it feel for the work." She picked up her mop again. "But hey, I'm just a primitive human. What do I know?" Similar revelations were happening across the galaxy, and each one made the Council members more uncomfortable. On the Altarian medical station, Dr. Patterson had been called in to help with the failing treatments. He spent an hour reviewing patient files before he figured out what was wrong. "You're treating symptoms, not causes," he explained to head physician Lyseth. "This Cruton patient?" "Yes, the neural interface failure looks like a technical problem, but it's actually an anxiety response." Lyseth's silver eyes widened. "Anxiety? Crutons don't experience anxiety. They're logic-based beings." "Everyone experiences anxiety," Patterson said patiently. "They just express it differently. Crutons show stress through electrical fluctuations. The interface isn't failing. It's picking up his fear responses and amplifying them." He adjusted the interface settings, not to improve the technical connection, but to filter out the emotional static. The Cruton's optical sensors immediately brightened and his vital signs stabilized. "How did you know to look for emotional factors?" Lyseth asked. "Because I listen to my patients," Patterson replied. "All of them. Even the ones who claim they don't have emotions." But the most disturbing discoveries were happening in the Council's own security department. Commander Zix had been reviewing the past 2 years of security reports, looking for any sign of human incompetence that might explain the current chaos. Instead, he found something that made his combat processors run cold simulations of disaster. His aide, Lieutenant Vexnall, brought him the files he had requested. "Sir, here are all the security incidents involving human personnel." Zix began reading. The first report was from 18 months ago. Human security consultant Webb flagged suspicious shipping manifests from Trader Captain Kelvos. Recommended additional screening. Investigation revealed smuggling operation moving weapons to rebel cells in Sector 7. The second report, human analyst Foster identified pattern in communication intercepts suggesting coordinated terrorist activity. Prediction proved accurate. Cell neutralized before planned attack on civilian transport. The third, human engineer Santos noticed unusual power consumption in Station 12's reactor systems. Investigation revealed sabotage device that would have caused critical failure during Council Elder Vexithani's visit. Report after report showed the same pattern. Humans identifying threats that sophisticated alien detection systems had missed. Humans noticing details that advanced analytical software had overlooked. humans making connections that pure logic couldn't reach. Commander Zix's combat systems began running threat assessments. If the humans had been this effective at stopping dangers while working with the Council, what would they be capable of when working against it? He activated a priority channel to the Council chambers. Meanwhile, Professor Theiss was making her own disturbing discoveries about human capabilities. She had always prided herself on her logical mind and mathematical precision. The idea that primitive humans could contribute anything to galactic science had seemed absurd, but the evidence was undeniable. The Nexari Trade Federation had reported economic chaos across their networks. Trade routes that had been optimized for maximum efficiency were failing. Complex financial models were producing losses instead of profits. Currency exchange systems were experiencing cascade failures. It took 3 days to trace the problem back to its source. Human accountants. They weren't following our mathematical models, reported senior economist Thexfar to the emergency council session. They were using something they called intuition and gut feelings about market trends. Impossible, Professor Theiss declared. Economic modeling requires precise mathematical analysis. Emotions have no place in financial calculations. That's what we thought too, Thexfar replied. But when we compared their performance to our computer models over the past 2 years, the humans were 73% more accurate in predicting market fluctuations. The chamber buzzed with alarm. Healer Morwen leaned forward. How is that possible? They say they look for patterns and trends that our computers miss. Something about reading between the lines and understanding psychology. They claim that markets aren't just mathematical systems. They're driven by emotional decisions made by living beings. Professor Theiss felt her equations flutter chaotically across her wings. Everything she understood about logic and reason suggested that emotional decisions were inferior to calculated ones. But the data was clear. The primitive humans had been consistently outperforming the galaxy's most advanced analytical systems. The final blow came from the Vorthak Collective, a species that prided itself on agricultural perfection. Their representative, growth leader Morden, delivered news that sent shockwaves through the assembly. Our food production has dropped by 40% since the humans were removed from agricultural consultation, he reported, his plant-like body wilting with distress. We cannot understand why. What exactly were the humans doing? Vexthani asked. Simple things, Morden replied. They suggested rotating crops in different fields each season. They recommended leaving some areas unplanted periodically. They even suggested introducing certain pest species that we had eliminated from our farms. Council Elder Zix's optical sensors flared. And you followed advice from primitive beings? The results were undeniable, Morden said quietly. Our yields increased by 300%. Our soil quality improved. Our crops became more resistant to disease and weather variations. But how? Professor Theiss demanded. Our agricultural systems are perfectly optimized. The humans said something about natural balance and ecosystem management, Morden explained. They claimed that perfect optimization often leads to fragility. They said that some chaos and inefficiency actually make systems stronger. The concept was revolutionary and terrifying. The entire galactic civilization was built on the principles of optimization, efficiency, and logical perfection. The idea that deliberate imperfection could be superior challenged everything they believed. As the reports continued to pour in, a horrible picture emerged. For 2 years, humans had been quietly improving every system they touched, not through advanced technology or superior intellects, but through something the aliens were struggling to understand. Creativity, intuition, the ability to see problems from unexpected angles, the willingness to try solutions that logic said shouldn't work. And most disturbing of all, the ability to understand and work with the chaotic, irrational, emotional aspects of life that the galaxy's advanced civilizations had tried to eliminate. We need to bring them back, Healer Morwen said finally, breaking the long silence that had fallen over the chamber. Agreed, said Professor Theiss, her wings showing equations she didn't want to calculate. Immediately, added Commander Zix, his threat assessment protocol screaming warnings about what humanity might do next. But Council Elder Vexithani, staring at reports that showed the galaxy falling apart without human involvement, had a terrible feeling that it might already be too late. The humans weren't just leaving their posts. They were preparing for something, and after 2 years of underestimating them, she had no idea what they were capable of. The message reached Earth exactly 72 hours after the Council's declaration. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching as the holographic display showed the galaxy's plea for humanity's return. "They want us back," reported Captain Williams, his voice carefully neutral. "Of course they do," Chen replied. She gestured to the massive screen showing reports from across human space. "Look at this. Every human ship, station, and colony has reported the same thing. Alien authorities demanding immediate return to previous positions. Some are offering double pay. Others are making threats." General Martinez, head of Earth's military forces, stepped forward. His weathered face showed the kind of smile that had made enemy commanders surrender without a fight. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Chen looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leadership. Scientists, diplomats, engineers, soldiers. For 2 years, they had worked alongside alien civilizations, helping, building, healing. They had been good galactic citizens. That time was over. "Gentlemen, ladies," Chen said quietly, "the galaxy has decided that we're inferior. They want us to go back to our jobs and pretend nothing happened." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "I think it's time we showed them what inferior humans can really accomplish." The response came not in words, but in action. Within hours, humanity's true capabilities began to reveal themselves. The first shock came from the human merchant fleet. Captain Sarah Kim of the cargo vessel Prosperity received her recall order while delivering medical supplies to a Zephyrian colony. The message was clear: return to your shipping routes immediately or face criminal charges. Kim looked at her crew and smiled. "Boys and girls, change of plans. We're not delivering medical supplies anymore." She opened the ship's communication system. "Attention Zephyrian colony control. The cargo you're expecting? It seems there's been a paperwork error. These medical supplies are actually labeled for Earth. Our mistake." "But Captain Kim," came the frantic reply, "our people are dying from the plague outbreak. We need those medicines." "Then I guess you should have thought of that before you declared us inferior," Kim replied cheerfully. "Have a nice day." The Prosperity changed course along with every other human merchant ship in that sector. Suddenly, colonies that had depended on human logistics found themselves cut off from critical supplies. Food, medicine, technology, raw materials, all of it suddenly unavailable. But that was just the beginning. Dr. Elena Vasquez was working in her laboratory on Mars when the recall order came through. For 2 years, she had been developing new technologies in partnership with alien research teams. Weapon systems, defensive shields, faster-than-light communication arrays, all of it shared freely with their galactic allies. "Ma'am," her assistant reported, "the Altarian Science Council demands immediate transfer of all research data. They say it belongs to the galactic community." Vasquez looked at the quantum computer cores that held 2 years of collaborative research. With a few keystrokes, she activated a program she had hoped never to use. "Data transfer initiated," she announced to her team. "All research files are being sent to Earth Archive. Everything else is being deleted." "But Doctor," her assistant protested, "the aliens contributed to this research too." "Yes, they did," Vasquez replied calmly. "But they also declared us too primitive to be equal partners. So now they can figure out how to rebuild it themselves. Good luck with that." Across the galaxy, human researchers were doing the same thing. Advanced weapons technology, medical breakthroughs, engineering innovations, all of it disappearing from alien databases as quickly as human fingers could type. The technological collaboration that had driven galactic progress for 2 years vanished. Overnight, the aliens were about to discover just how much of their advancement had depended on human creativity. But the real shock came when humanity began to demonstrate what they could accomplish, when they stopped helping and started hindering. Lieutenant Commander Jack Torres received his orders while his stealth ship, Phoenix, was conducting reconnaissance near the Crouton border. The message was simple: return to base immediately and report for reassignment to manual labor. Torres looked at his crew and grinned. "Well, team, looks like we're unemployed. I guess that means we're free to pursue other opportunities." The Phoenix had been designed as a research vessel, equipped with the most advanced sensor arrays humanity could build. But Torres and his crew were all veterans of the corporate wars, and they remembered how to use research equipment for very different purposes. Within days, Mysterious technical failures began plaguing crouton military installations. Communication arrays that had worked perfectly for years suddenly developed interference. Navigation systems started producing random errors. Weapon targeting computers began experiencing glitches at the worst possible moments. The croutons couldn't figure out what was happening. Their security systems detected no intruders, no physical sabotage, no obvious attacks. But their military efficiency dropped by 60% almost overnight. Similar problems were affecting every major power in the galaxy. The Zephyrians found their mining equipment suffering constant breakdowns. The Altarians discovered their medical databases had been corrupted, with critical formulas replaced by human recipes for chocolate chip cookies. The Hive Collective's organic ships began developing what could only be described as indigestion. And in the neutral zone, where three fleets still faced each other in tense standoff, things got much worse. Admiral Vectar of the Crouton fleet was trying to maintain his position when his tactical displays began showing impossible readings. According to his sensors, there were 17 human dreadnoughts surrounding his fleet. That was clearly impossible. Humans didn't have dreadnoughts. Sensor error, he announced confidently. Humans don't have warships of that class. But Queen Zareth of the Hive Collective was seeing the same readings on her organic sensors. Her swarm ships detected massive energy signatures that matched no known human technology. Yet the signatures were unmistakably human in origin. Trade Captain Moss of the Free Traders was panicking. His merchant fleet was surrounded by contacts that his computers insisted were heavily armed human vessels. But his eyes saw empty space. None of them could figure out what was happening. How were the humans projecting false sensor readings? How are they making every detection system in three fleets report the same impossible data? The answer was simple, though none of the aliens would have believed it. Chief Engineer Rodriguez and her team had spent 2 years maintaining the sensor arrays for all three fleets. They knew exactly how each system worked, what its limitations were, and how to make it see whatever they wanted it to see. The human ships were real. They were just much smaller and more advanced than anyone had expected. What the aliens were seeing as dreadnoughts were actually a new class of stealth frigates, equipped with holographic projectors that made them appear as massive warships to any sensor system they chose to fool. But the psychological effect was devastating. 3 major fleets found themselves apparently surrounded by a human armada that had appeared from nowhere, using technology that shouldn't exist. The standoff that had lasted hours suddenly became a 3-way retreat as each fleet tried to escape the phantom human fleet that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen watched the reports with satisfaction. "How are our people doing out there?" she asked. "Better than expected," General Martinez replied. "Turns out that 2 years of working closely with alien technology gave our teams intimate knowledge of every major system in the galaxy. We know how everything works, and more importantly, we know how to make it stop working. And our new ships? The stealth frigates are performing perfectly. The aliens never realized we were building them. They assumed our shipyards were just producing cargo vessels." Martinez smiled grimly. "They're learning that assuming things about humans is dangerous." Chen nodded. Phase 1 of humanity's response was complete. They had withdrawn their cooperation, removed their expertise, and demonstrated that they could disrupt alien operations at will. Now it was time for Phase 2. "Send a message to all human forces," Chen ordered. "Operation Schoolyard is authorized. It's time to teach the galaxy what happens when you pick on someone you think is smaller than you." Across the galaxy, human ships began moving with new purpose. They had spent 2 years learning how galactic civilization worked. Now they were going to teach the aliens how it felt when it didn't work at all. The galaxy was about to discover that when humans decided to stop being helpful, they became something much more dangerous. They became creative. The galaxy was burning, but not with fire. It was burning with the slow, inexorable collapse of everything the great civilizations had built over thousands of years. Council Elder Vexithani stood in her crystal chambers on Zenthara Prime, staring at reports that seemed impossible to believe. In just 2 weeks since the humans had withdrawn their cooperation, galactic civilization was falling apart. The Zephyrian Confederation had lost 40% of its industrial capacity. Mining operations sat idle, not because of equipment failure, but because nobody understood the subtle adjustments that kept the machinery running smoothly. Chief Operations Manager Veltar had sent increasingly desperate messages, begging for the return of human engineers. His latest report simply read, "We are drowning in our own perfection." The Altarian Medical Corps was facing a crisis that threatened to topple their entire healthcare system. Without human insights into the emotional and psychological factors of healing, their advanced treatments were failing at unprecedented rates. Patients who should have recovered were dying, not from their injuries but from despair that the cold, efficient Altarian methods couldn't address. But the worst news came from the economic sector. The Nexari Trade Federation was hemorrhaging money as their mathematical models proved worthless, without human intuition to guide them. Senator Thexfar's latest report was barely coherent. The markets are behaving irrationally. Our computers cannot predict what beings will do when they act on emotion rather than logic. We need the humans back. We need them back now. Vexithani's crystal form flickered with distress as she read the final report from Commander Zix. The security situation was catastrophic, not because of open warfare, but because of something far more insidious: uncertainty. Human stealth ships were appearing throughout the galaxy, never attacking, just watching. They would decloak long enough to be detected, show themselves to alien sensors, then vanish again. The psychological impact was devastating. Every alien commander knew they were being observed, but nobody knew when, where, or why. Trade routes that had been safe for centuries were being abandoned as merchant captains reported mysterious ship contacts that vanished when investigated. Military patrols found themselves chasing sensor ghosts that led them in circles through empty space. Even worse, critical infrastructure was suffering random failures that looked like accidents but followed patterns too precise to be coincidental. The humans weren't conquering the galaxy. They were making it too frightening and unreliable to function. "We have to end this," Vexithani announced to her emergency council session. The great crystal dome was packed with representatives who looked nothing like the confident beings who had declared humans inferior 2 weeks ago. "How?" demanded Commander Zix, his red optical sensors flickering with what might have been fear. "We can't fight an enemy we can't find. We can't negotiate with beings who won't respond to our communications. We can't even understand how they're doing what they're doing." Professor Theis's wings trembled, showing equations that described chaos theory and system collapse. "Our analysis suggests that the humans have identified critical failure points in galactic infrastructure. They're not attacking randomly. They're targeting the exact components that hold our civilization together." "But how could primitive beings understand our systems better than we do?" protested Senator Clymoth. "Because they weren't primitive," Healer Morwen said quietly. "We were just too arrogant to see what they really were." The chamber fell silent. Outside, the purple sky of Xanthera Prime was dark with clouds, matching the mood of the assembled representatives. "I'll go to Earth myself," Vexithani announced finally. "I'll apologize personally to their leadership. I'll offer them full council membership, equal voting rights, whatever they want." "And if they refuse?" asked Commander Zix. Vexithani considered the question. If the humans refused, galactic civilization would continue its spiral into chaos. Infrastructure would keep failing. Trade would collapse. Military effectiveness would degrade. Eventually, the great powers would turn on each other, blaming one another for the catastrophe. "Then we adapt to a very different galaxy," she said. The journey to Earth took 3 days, with Vexithani traveling aboard the fastest ship in the Council fleet. As they approached the Sol system, her pilot reported something unexpected. Council Elder were being escorted. Vexithani looked at the tactical display. Dozens of human ships surrounded her vessel, appearing and disappearing in precise formation. They were smaller than galactic standard warships, but they moved with a coordination that spoke of advanced technology and superior training. "Are they threatening us?" she asked. "No, ma'am. They're guiding us, showing us where to go." The human escort led them not to Earth's orbital stations, but to a small space dock near Luna. As Vexithani's shuttle approached the docking bay, she noticed something that made her crystal form glow with surprise. The dock was surrounded by human warships unlike anything in the galactic databases, sleek, fast, bristling with weapons that seemed to bend space around them. These weren't the primitive vessels the Council had expected humans to build. These were ships designed by people who understood war at a fundamental level. Admiral Sarah Chen was waiting for her in a simple conference room overlooking Earth's moon. The human looked exactly as she had during the council session, calm, confident, and completely unafraid. Council Elder Vexthani, Chen said politely. Welcome to Luna Base, please sit down. Vexthani settled into a chair that had been specially designed for her crystal anatomy. Through the window, she could see Earth turning slowly in the darkness, blue and white and beautiful. It was hard to believe that this peaceful-looking world was the source of the chaos gripping the galaxy. I've come to apologize, Vexthani began. I know, Chen replied. The question is whether you understand what you're apologizing for. Vexthani felt a flicker of her old irritation. Even now, the human was being cryptic instead of direct. We underestimated your capabilities. We were wrong to classify your species as inferior. Chen smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. You still don't get it, do you? Explain it to me. Chen stood and walked to the window looking out at Earth. You didn't just underestimate our capabilities. You completely misunderstood what we are. She turned back to face the alien leader. Tell me, what did your intelligence report say about human history? That you're a violent species with a tendency toward warfare and conflict. And what did you conclude from that? That you were primitive and dangerous. Chen nodded slowly. There's the problem. You looked at our capacity for violence and saw primitiveness. But violence isn't primitive, Council Elder. Violence is a tool like mathematics or engineering. The question isn't whether a species can fight. It's whether they choose when and how to fight. She gestured toward the human warships visible through the window. For 2 years, we worked alongside your people. We helped you solve problems, improve your systems, keep the peace. We could have been building weapons instead. We could have been preparing for war. But we chose cooperation. Vexthani's crystal form flickered with understanding, until we forced you to choose otherwise. Exactly. Chen sat back down, her expression serious. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? It's not our technology or our weapons. It's that we understand conflict in ways that peaceful species have forgotten. We know how systems fail because we've built our entire civilization around surviving failure. Chen activated a holographic display showing galactic infrastructure maps. Your civilizations are marvels of efficiency and optimization. But efficiency is fragile. Optimization creates single points of failure. You built a galaxy that works perfectly under ideal conditions. The display zoomed in on critical junction points, trade routes, communication networks. We spent 2 years learning how it all fits together. Not just the technical specifications, but the psychology behind it. The assumptions you make. The blind spots you don't even know you have. And now you're using that knowledge against us. We're using that knowledge to teach you a lesson, Chen corrected. The galaxy you built is beautiful, but it's also brittle. It depends on everyone playing by the same rules, wanting the same things, thinking the same way. But diversity isn't just about having different shaped bodies or different home planets. Real diversity means different ways of thinking, different approaches to problems, different solutions to challenges. Chen leaned forward. You declared us inferior because we don't fit your template of what an advanced species should look like. But templates are limitations. They're boxes that constrain creativity and innovation. So what do you want from us? We want you to understand what you almost threw away, Chen replied. The galaxy doesn't need another species of logical, efficient, optimized beings. You already have plenty of those. What you need is a species that thinks differently, that sees problems from angles you'd never consider, that can find solutions in chaos and create order from disorder. Chen stood and extended her hand. The question is, are you ready to accept humans as equals, not despite our differences, but because of them? Vexthani looked at the offered hand. Such a simple gesture, but loaded with meaning. In her culture, physical contact was reserved for the most solemn agreements.